The streets that you mentioned, the rest are still under construction. They're not.
Correct.
This is the first part of.
Yes, this was the first phase. The punch list of the development agreement included basically dividing the subdivision into two phases. Phase one was basically the multifamily section, and then phase two is the single family section. So the roads that were completed currently are in phase one, which is the multifamily section. The phase two is to be completed by November 1st of 2016.
Okay.
And we won't be following it until it's finished up.
Right.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Costa?
Aye.
Trustee Caprio?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Trustee Sweet?
Aye.
Trustee Varian?
Aye.
Trustee Knights-Trachey?
Aye.
Motion carries. Number 6, is there a motion to approve ordinance number 15-048, ordinance accepting certain public improvements, roadway pavement, curb and gutter, and completed sidewalks in the Cedar Brook subdivision. It is understood this ordinance only accepts the noted improvements.
I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Trustee Trujillo. Is there any discussion?
Just a quick question. This covers all the roads in Cedar Brook, so
Correct.
everything was completed.
Correct. All the roads.
100%.
All the roads have the final surface, all the curb and gutter, wherever it was necessary, any repairs were made, and then whatever sidewalks are current at this time. Obviously, the remaining sidewalks, and this was included in the development agreement, as the houses are built, the sidewalks in front of those homes will be built at that time.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Motion carries. Oh, we got them. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Costa?
Aye.
Trustee Caprio?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Trustee Sweet?
Aye.
Trustee Varian?
Aye.
Trustee Knights-Trachey?
Aye.
Motion carries. Number 7, approval of ordinance accepting certain public improvements in the Goodings Grove Phase 2 subdivision. I need a motion to approve ordinance number 15-049, an ordinance accepting certain public improvements in the Goodings Grove Phase 2 subdivision. It is understood that the only public improvements to be accepted at this time is Greystone Drive, back of curb to back of curb from the south terminus point is indicated in the Goodings Grove Phase 2 subdivision plat. It is just north of intersection of Greystone Drive and Glengarry Drive. So moved. First by Trustee Costa,
I'll second.
second by Trustee Trujillo. Is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Knights-Trachey?
Aye.
Trustee Varian?
Aye.
Trustee Sweet?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Trustee Caprio?
Aye.
Trustee Costa?
Aye. Motion carries. Next is a workshop item. H.R. Green's presentation of the Woodbine area drainage study. We got to turn the lights on for part of
I will ask Logan to come and make the presentation. Thank you very much again for the opportunity to work on this very interesting project. Logan?
Hi, good evening. So this presentation has a lot of items that you've already seen before, some of the existing conditions that have previously been presented. So I'll try to go through those a little more quickly and get to the new information, the proposed items. So it's really quick. As a reminder, the project scope was to do a regional drainage study through the area surrounding the former Woodbine development. This included the subdivisions of Saddlebrook Run, Stadtler Ridge, Woodbine, Woodbine West, and portions of the Pebble Creek subdivision, as well as the adjacent roadways. So within the entire village, this is where we were studying, and more focused in, we're studying these subdivisions. It's important to note that these two streams here are part of the part of the Long Run Creek watershed. So part of our project, we did a lot of background research to determine the extent of flooding, and just how frequently it was happening, how bad it was. We did this by meeting with village staff with the road district. We also looked at photos that were supplied by the village and road district as well as residents. We reviewed available topographic data to determine the areas draining into the study area. And then we also sent out a resident questionnaire. I believe we sent out, it was over 450 approximately questionnaires, and we received about 33% back. And for studies of this nature, that is basically unheard of. 10% is a good percent. We got a lot of return on this, so it's definitely worth doing the resident survey. And then we also held a public meeting where residents were able to come in and ask questions about their specific properties or bring up ideas of how we could solve some of these drainage issues. All this information was used to generate a hydrologic and hydraulic model, which we used a computer program called XP Swim to model the watersheds and determine how flooding was actually occurring. So this is just a photo of a past event. This is an intersection in the Woodbine subdivision. It actually looks like a lake. So this is, to me, very serious flooding for a neighborhood to have. And when we started doing some of the topographic research, we did notice that this type of flooding made perfect sense. We have a lot of off-site areas that are actually outside of the study area, but they drain into these neighborhoods, so they need to be accounted for. A few other things I'd like to point out on here are that the Stadtler Ridge Estates has a pretty large agricultural area draining through it, as well as Woodbine West has, this is about 45 acres, kind of skimming the southern end of that neighborhood. And then the Woodbine subdivision itself has the former golf course draining through it, as well as about 115 acres of wetland and agricultural area draining through it. We've presented this image before, but this is just showing the study area with elevation depicted as color. The orange and yellow are the high areas, and then as you go down, you get the green and blue areas, and that just shows you the relief throughout the study area. So our resident survey came back, and we went through and mapped who responded to the survey, and then depicted what type of flooding they reported based on color. We surprisingly actually had a lot of people who reported that there was no flooding. The people with this black hatch over them, they reported that they did not have any drainage issues on their property. And then as far as people who did report issues, we kind of did what we thought was an intuitive way of depicting their problem. Red was the worst type of flooding to be reported. This was structural flooding of a basement or a home. Yard and street is everything being inundated. And then all the way to yard flooding, which was depicted in green, which it's a problem, but a home wasn't flooded in these instances. So, as a reminder, we've presented this before, but there are really three ways to manage stormwater. The first is to convey it. This is to put larger pipes in the ground, to open up ditches and swales. You can also detain it. This is where you store water in a detention pond and release it slowly so that your conveyance system can manage the flow that you're releasing. And lastly, you can infiltrate it. Now this is the use of rain gardens or naturalized detention basins in which you actually will soak water into the ground rather than conveying it directly to a stream. This can be useful for smaller events where rain isn't that intense. You can actually hold the water and rely on it to infiltrate into the ground. However, we did a soil study for the area, and there's a lot of clay in the ground, and clay does not readily infiltrate water. So for large events, infiltration will not be the solution to any of the issues out here. So now we're going to go through subdivision by subdivision and discuss some of the improvements that we've been proposing. We're going to start out with Stadtler Ridge Estates. As I had mentioned before, from the southwest, we have a fairly large drainage area of agricultural land. It's draining basically through the subdivision to the northeast. It's, I believe, 58 acres, just trying to remember. It's 58 acres draining through a subdivision that most likely was not designed to have that flow go directly through it. The primary source of conveying stormwater through here is a 12-inch field tile. And that's depicted, this red line here. It zigzags through the subdivision and outlets into a detention pond on the northeast corner. Now, field tiles are pipes that were most likely installed before any of these subdivisions were here. They're put in the ground and they're meant to drain groundwater. Over time, people will tie inlets into them and use them as a storm sewer, but in reality, these were most likely installed to drain agricultural land. Now, agricultural land, if it rains and there's water stored on the surface for a day or two, it's not really bothering anybody. But when you build homes there and rely on that to drain everything out, if you have water standing in people's yards for a few days, or potentially flooding a structure, that's not the best way to drain your areas. It's not very reliable. So something that we've been proposing is to take that drainage area from the southwest and actually bypass it around the subdivision. We're proposing to install a swale along the southern property limits of the homes along Stonehaven Drive here. There's an existing drainage easement there that can be utilized, and actually at the moment there is no drainage conveyance system in there at all. When this area was built, the swale was built directly through the center of the rear yards. It's not actually in the easement. And because it's not in the easement, a lot of people have encroached into the stream, into the swale, and actually caused more problems for their neighbors. By putting it in an easement, it's something that can actually be maintained by the village, and it's farther away from people's homes. So what we'd be doing is draining down to the edge of Cream Road here, and then installing a storm sewer system to convey it up to a tributary to Long Run Creek. In addition, all the water that actually falls within the subdivision is still relying on that drain tile to make its way to the northeast corner and into this detention pond. To solve that problem, we're proposing doing a local storm sewer system within the subdivision that will handle the water that actually falls within the subdivision. Now, I hope you may be thinking, why can't we just increase the size of that drain tile? We are able to actually improve the drain tile within the village's right of way. However, if it's on private property, it is up to the private property owner to maintain that pipe. So to really make this something that the village can rely on to drain the subdivision, we're proposing installing something entirely within the right of way so that we have rights to it, to maintain it, and just to make sure it's functioning properly. We believe that this will address most of the drainage complaints that we received throughout the Stadtler Ridge Estates subdivision. Next, we're going to move on to the Woodbine West subdivision. Through the topographic survey, this area is actually fairly well drained. It has some good relief to it, and it's higher up relative to the surrounding areas. I did mention, though, that the southern portion of it down here has 45 acres draining into this detention basin here, which then flows through private property. We spoke to this property owner here, and they were mentioning that they do have yard flooding frequently. Something that could be done is a open channel could be graded on their property. However, this is on private land. And additionally, downstream of there, we have a section of drain tile that is within the village's right of way, the road district's right of way, that can be improved upon, but everything on their property would be their responsibility to improve. So we are able to actually make modifications to this basin or modify the drain tile downstream. And this should improve things for that property owner. Now, you might notice a lot of other people up here who've filed basement flooding complaints or yard complaints. This area is actually one of the highest areas throughout the entire study boundary. And it doesn't really make sense looking at the topography that they would have drainage complaints there. The plats for this subdivision have a swale running through the rear yards with the high point being right about here. But if you look at the aerial photography right now, homes just downstream of where we were receiving complaints, it appears that they've actually built fences across their swales that were meant to drain out the rear yards and potentially installed landscaping that would block flow paths. And we end up getting drainage complaints directly upstream of them. Now, this is something that isn't truly a regional problem, so it's not addressed specifically property by property in the report, but this is something that we notice is just kind of widespread throughout the study area. It's something that can be addressed through opening up drainage easements again. However, it's not a regional solution to fix large flooding issues. I just wanted to bring that up. And again, many of the other isolated flooding instances, they actually reported there was a sump pump failure. So again, that's nothing that is the village's responsibility. The next subdivision was the Saddlebrook. This is another very high area, and all the reported flooding through here had to do with sump pump failures. So again, we do not propose any improvements here. Through studying the drainage system here, it appears to be functioning fairly well. And this leaves the Woodbine subdivision. This has the largest area draining into it and did have a very high rate of response from the residents during their survey. So because this was such a complex drainage area with large watersheds draining into it, we used a two-dimensional XP swim model here. Now this is a computer program that takes all of the storm sewer system and links it to a 3D surface in the computer. So anytime the storm sewer or ditches become overwhelmed, it'll actually let the water overflow onto a 3D surface so that we can map how far flooding actually occurs, how deep it gets, and how long it stays on the surface. And this is an example of what that looks like. So this is the Woodbine subdivision. All the blue lines are the major storm sewers. We did not model all the little cross laterals for everything. But you can see at some of these intersections here, this is Continuing Lane and Eagle Ridge Drive. We're getting water that's over a foot deep, and that's actually going over the curb. Curbs are typically 6 inches tall. And that's impacting a lot of yards. We're having rear yard flooding back here, flooding at the intersection of Greenleaf and Eagle Ridge. This is actually where that photo was taken. And this is pretty widespread flooding. It's also worth noting that today, if a storm sewer is designed, it's generally designed to manage the 10-year storm without any surcharging or flooding into the streets. So, and realistically, there should not be flooding in this area. So, our solutions, as I mentioned, infiltration with heavy storms in the soils that we have is not really viable. So we looked at conveyance and detention. Through a survey of the storm sewer system, we did determine there are a few locations where the storm sewer was actually constructed so that it's back-pitched, meaning it does not slope downhill. Water will actually have to build up in the pipe before it can drain down. So we noticed that in one location that is actually a pretty big issue. We did notice that some of the sewers appear to be undersized, and that we did also get a lot of complaints from residents who lived immediately along the former golf course, saying that the golf course just sheets into their backyard. They have kind of undefined flow entering their backyards. So something that we're proposing there is potentially a bioswale to direct flow out of their yards. A bioswale is just a ditch that's planted with native plants. They're actually very visually appealing, and they help a lot with water quality. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. The second thing is detention. There's a lot of open space on the former golf course. So we're proposing installing 2 detention basins, and these would be a naturalized detention pond. And that's planted with plants that are native to the state of Illinois, and they have a very deep root system. Now, this is beneficial because those roots go down into the clay soils, which don't readily infiltrate water, and they can actually break it up and make it so that more water will infiltrate into the ground than it currently does. Now, I'm going to go through just really quick how our solution will look in the Woodbine area. We're proposing a phased approach. The first phase will be to fix the undersized storm sewer and some of the back-pitch pipes. Now, those are the pipes in orange here, right through Center Park, connecting into Pebble Creek. And along Continuing Lane here, there are some sewers that were actually installed undersized, it appears. So doing that is a smaller project that can be done rather quickly, and that will drastically bring down the amount of flooding that we're seeing. Phase 2 is that we're proposing installing the naturalized detention basins in the former Woodbine Golf Course. That would be approximately this footprint and this footprint down here, and we have better images of these later on. And then the third phase is essentially an overhaul of the main trunk sewer through Eagle Ridge Drive here, and that's the green dashed line. That would be removing the existing storm sewer and replacing it with larger pipes to fully convey the 10-year storm. Those pipe sizes vary from 48-inch up to 18-inch in diameter. So on the golf course property, these were the footprints of the naturalized basins that we were proposing. This is what we worked with Applied Ecological Services to develop. And these areas were noted in the Long Run Creek Watershed-Based Plan as locations that can be improved upon to improve water quality in the watershed as a whole. Now this is very important because that allows us to apply for funding to actually have these basins constructed. Now, the fact that the Long Run Creek watershed-based plan has been approved by the IEPA means that we're eligible for a type of funding called the 319 grant, which can help quite a bit with funding projects like this. We've, in the past, received about 80% of a project paid for by the Illinois EPA. It's also important to note that the existing open water that is out there, with their golf course hazards right now, they will be maintained. They can remain there. It's not like we're going to be digging them up and draining them out or anything. So we'll still have open water out there, and those ponds can actually be expanded upon as part of the park improvement. These basins can actually be used as an amenity in the park. We've got a few photos here of a naturalized detention basin and then a wetland. But this is somewhat what these basins would look like. We have the existing open water, and then around it, native wetland plants. A lot of these are flowering, and they are actually designed to out-compete cattails so that they'll be low-profile plants, and we can install, as part of your park improvements, trails around here or boardwalks and things like that so that residents can enjoy these basins. This is an example of a naturalized wetland, and got some oak trees in the background. We're actually proposing installing some oak trees to replace a lot of the ash trees that have died due to ash borer recently. But this is what we would expect to see out there. These are actually projects that have been constructed by Applied Ecological Services, our partner on this project, and they actually build these. They're a contractor who can go out, and this is the type of work that they do. So the big question is, what is this going to do for the flooding in the subdivision? Now, just as a reminder, this is what the existing 10-year storm is doing, and this is what a storm sewer should be designed to handle. We've got all the flooding through the intersection of Kentucky and Eagle Ridge, and at the intersection down here. We're doing a phase 1 improvement. We're able to bring down flooding pretty dramatically through this intersection and reduce the footprint of flooding here. This actually brings it down so it's primarily within the roadway, but we still have a little bit of backyard flooding here. Now, again, phase 1 improvement was just replacing the pipe right through Senator Park here and a small portion through Kentucky Lane. Phase 2, adding the detention basins out in the golf course, we further reduce the footprint of flooding during a 10-year storm. And then by doing the phase 3 improvements of replacing the storm sewer, we can have no street flooding at all. So the next steps are for the village to review the report. We've completed it and supplied copies of the report. You can review the recommendations and determine which projects you would like to move forward with. From that point, final design and construction documents will need to be prepared prior to anything actually going into the ground. But we would expect construction to begin as soon as funds are available, because these projects will definitely improve the drainage conditions out there. So with that, are there any questions?
Yeah, that's a great report. Thank you. Very thorough. The presentation you had for the hearing, a lot of this information was there, and I did pick your brain a little bit, answer questions. You haven't done any, to this point, you haven't done any soil sampling at all yet, right?
No, we use something from the NRCS. It's a web soil survey, and you can go in and look at a area of interest, and it will give you all the hydraulic soil classifications. Through this area, they're considered type D soils, and that's actually the worst for infiltrating water. That means that a lot of the rain falls on it, it actually will run off, similar to a parking lot.
Okay, I know on the phase that we, when we put the detention area in the northeast corner and along the eastern border there, there's going to be considerable amount of dirt to move. And of course, my interest in that is, as we move forward with the park planning, we're going to evidently eventually have to balance off the land.
Yes.
And it would be good to be able to use some of that soil to balance the parcel itself off and save the cost of bringing soil in or taking this out and disposing of it. So.
Yeah, I'm expecting it to be primarily clay and silty clay. And we did design these basins with the grading plan to minimize the amount of excavation that needs to take place. That northeast corner of the former golf course is already kind of a low-lying area, so we took advantage of that and tried to do as little digging as possible, but still provide a lot of detention. I wouldn't anticipate hauling off any of the soil from this, as it can be used for other improvements throughout the park. But in the report, we do specify how much volume these basins will be adding. So that's an approximate earthwork number. Okay, great. Thank you. Good report. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions?
Quick one. The basin in the northeast corner,
Yeah.
what's the proposed size of that approximately?
I believe the total footprint is about 7 acres. The entire property itself is about 104 acres. So it's not that large in an area, and since it is already a low-lying area, it makes sense to use that space. And again, it doesn't mean it needs to be off limits to the public. We've seen projects where elevated boardwalks are installed through basins like this. The grading can be modified to actually put asphalt or limestone trails through it as well.
The basin on the southeast corner, that just expands what already exists there with that pond that's already there?
Yeah, there is an open water, wet bottom retention pond there right now that does not appear to be, it wasn't designed for stormwater retention. It appears that it was for part of the irrigation system in the golf course. But what happens is when it rains, that basin.
Can you put that slide up so they can
Oh,
see
yes.
it?
So we're discussing this basin down here. What happens right now is that when it rains, this portion of the golf course drains into this retention pond, and then when this overtops, it flows directly at the homes right here. Now, what we'd be doing is modifying the overflow point for this retention pond, the open water, so that it would overflow into this detention basin. This would eventually be a dry bottom basin, but for approximately 48 hours after a storm, it would hold water in the bottom of it and slowly drain it into the storm sewer system, and then eventually along Eagle Ridge Drive through the subdivision. Both of these were designed to be to maintain the existing footprint of the wet ponds, and then to eventually become a dry bottom pond again. As we had discussed a little bit on the side, these ponds can be expanded as part of the park, and they won't harm the performance of these basins. If the village would like to excavate more to make these larger ponds, that can be done, and it won't affect the performance of the basin at all.
Okay, that was going to be my next question.
Okay.
So one of the potential amenities we've discussed is a fishing pond or something to that nature, and that can be expanded upon
Yes, we
if that was
discussed.
decided.
Yes, it's discussed in detail in the report, along with some recommendations as to if these ponds are expanded, how to maintain water quality in the park.
And the bioswale that we're talking about along, that's all on park property, right?
Yes.
That's not an easement, that would all be park property?
Yes, yeah, it's this yellow strip right here.
Okay.
What's happening is this portion of the golf course is actually draining right along the property line and getting into these backyards here. By putting this here and directing it into one of the existing open ponds there, we'll stop that flow from entering all the private property and keep it on the golf course, and then actually force it into the detention basins, so they can be stored and released slowly.
Hey, what's the approximate width of something like that, of a bioswale like that?
The top width is normally about 20 feet. They can be made narrower, but we would like to keep them a little bit deeper, probably 2 feet deep from the top where it ties into the existing slope to the very bottom. And they can be planted with flowering plants, native grasses, and not all these plants need to be 5 feet tall. A lot of them, we can pick a plant palette that's below waist height or even knee height. So you still get all the flowers, but it's not going to obstruct your view. And a lot of these plants, we work with Applied Ecological to actually pick them. They specifically choose plants that do not look like weeds.
And then I think maybe my final question, in the Woodbine subdivision, most of the work that we're talking about, and I think maybe this was touched on at the public meeting, but most of that work, when we talk about running leaf sewers through, most of that can be done on public easement, not tearing up pavement, that sort of thing, but between sidewalks and street.
In the locations where the existing storm sewer is underneath the street, we would just be using the same trench to dig up the old one and install a new pipe in the same trench. So we would not be having to tear up the entire street, but in locations that it currently is underneath pavement, it would make sense to install in the same location. Generally, the main pipe that carries the majority of the flow is located between the back of the curb and the sidewalk. However, with the winding streets, it does make it so we can meet the pavement in a lot of locations.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
But just on that same topic, did you say that the width difference was 12 inches to 48 inches? Is that what I heard you say, brother?
Yes. The existing outlet for the subdivision is a 48-inch pipe, but that's at the location where the pipe is actually pitched in the wrong direction.
Right,
So
that's near the center part.
Yeah, that's right about here. So that would be replaced with the same diameter of pipe, but it would just be laid at the proper slope. And then as we work our way upstream, the pipes, generally get smaller as you go upstream because they have less flow going through them. But at the upstream-most portion, we'd be at an 18-inch diameter pipe. It's currently a 12-inch up there.
So when the pipe was put in originally, they put the wrong pipe in?
My assumption would be that the off-site areas, the area that was on the golf course, and some of the areas south of 151st most likely was not accounted for.
I would just close with, we gave you guys a very aggressive schedule of wanting to and you held to that and I think beat it. And the other term that I love is under budget, and I think I heard that at the beginning. So I just commend you guys for the work you've done. This and an aggressive schedule and coming in under budget on top of the quality of what we see in this report. So
Thank you.
good job.
I just want to add, I think that this is why we said, one of the reasons why we said it's so important that we get that park planner to work together with them, because when we're talking about this dirt, we don't want to take dirt off-site that maybe could be used for a sledding hill or something in there, and that's why we really need to and I know you guys are working on that park planner, but that's something that we really need to be aggressive on as well.
And all this could start when? Springtime?
That can start, it depends on the village, the funds become available. The next step would be to prepare the contract plans, go out for bid and start the work. So that's up to you to decide when you want it done.
I would like to add though, the modeling that we did to create these images to show the proposed flooding limits is very detailed. It's to the point where putting together actual construction documents, a lot of the background work's already been completed as part of this study. So we already have a good starting point.
One more quick question, just how long does it take for the grant funding for the other portions that can actually be funded by grants versus parts that can't?
Yeah, the 319 funding can vary greatly. I mean, we're applying for a grant, and you need to wait to hear back and get approval. And there's actually a lot of paperwork that goes into proving that what you're going to do here is going to meet what the watershed-based plan, says you can do. You need to be able to prove that it's going to reduce, say, sediment or nutrients or some kind of pollutant from getting into Long Run Creek. With this location, I believe that's a very good possibility that this area used to be a wetland. It's identified in the watershed-based plan that it historically was a wetland. That we restored it to a detention basin that acts as a wetland. That is the exact goal that the Illinois EPA already approved in the watershed-based plan. As far as the exact timeline, I can't give you an exact number.
12 to 18 months. It takes a lot of time. But I would recommend it be worth pursuing because it's close to about $798,000 to construct those two plants. So that's a considerable amount of money and maybe worth waiting. But again, it will be up to the village.
But we can still continue on with sewage.
And do all the rest of the work. I think the most beneficial would be to get rid of that back pitch that you have, and you get the biggest bang for your buck by just making that improvement and that storm sewer.
Right.
You don't have to do the long run, but just do the small steps. We have broken it down into various phases that can be constructed quickly.
The application periods are from June 1st through August 1st every year.
We have been successful in the past working with Applied Ecological to get this grant for some of our projects.
Look at the 319 funding, is that federal money that is passed through the IEPA?
Yes, yeah, we don't need to worry about
Okay.
state funding. It's federal EPA that comes through the state.
That's very good to hear. And this is going to be taken out of the bond fund for the flooding.
Drainage work would definitely be an approved project from the bond fund.
You mentioned approximate cost on the detention ponds. Do we have, obviously, this all has to be put in construction documents, but do we have guesstimates, ballparks on what each phase would potentially cost?
Yes, we have planning numbers put together for the 2 improvements in Stadtler Ridge, and then we have numbers for the 3 phases of the Woodbine subdivision. They're included in the report, but just really quick, the phase 1 in the Woodbine subdivision of replacing that portion of storm sewer and some along Cantigny is estimated at $321,000. The detention basins on the former golf course, approximately $800,000. And then to do full replacement of the entire storm sewer system, a planning number is about $1.35 million. In the Stadtler Ridge subdivision, the bypass sewer, the one that was the ditch and the storm sewer, that one's estimated at about $470,000. And then for the local drainage, due to the storm sewer within the subdivision, an estimate is $377,000. These are all outlined in the report.
Thank you.
Do we have a copy of the report yet?
Yes, we provided.
I've got some copies, and then we've got it electronically, so we can get everybody electronic copies as well.
Yeah, you want to electronic copy? Thank you.
Okay. We really do appreciate what you have done for the village. You'll always come through for us. So thank you very much. And with that, are there any other questions with you? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? All right. Next item is executive session. Is there a motion to go into executive session for purposes of reviewing executive session minutes and discussing land acquisition and personnel matters? So moved. Trustee Costa.
Second.
Trustee Caprio. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be going into executive session. I wish I could tell you how long it's going to be, but